I remember an interview I went for nearly 8 years ago where the woman behind the desk asked me, "So, what do you think are your areas of improvement?" Now, that's a very tricky question. You want to give an honest answer, but you don't want to ruin your chances of being hired. So I said, "I can come across as aggressive sometimes." And she looked at this face and she heard that tone and she said, "You don't seem aggressive to me." "Oh, maybe I've been down on my health the past few weeks, but yeah, I'm very aggressive, yes." For the sake of getting a job, I was trying to convince her that I'm an aggressive person when I'm not. But despite that disastrous interview, I got the job. It was a global investment bank. I worked with them for almost 8 years. Every day I managed a team and we found ways to create efficiency for the bank. We handled something called derivative operations. For those of you who are familiar with the 2008 financial crisis, this product is one for the books. A lot of companies, people, and monetary books went thumbs down in the history of austerity. I was promoted almost every 2 years, so I did all right. The job kept me on my toes. The people were friendly. My mentors were supportive. Everything was just as it should be. Only, I felt like I was in the wrong place. I felt split right in my center. One part would be going through the motions of daily business as usual, whereas the other one would be writing a story or a poem or dreaming of being in a new city. My notebooks were filled with endless bullet points. Write, publish, travel, lose 30 pounds in a month. It was a conundrum because there was no way I could find time to do all those things I wanted to do. I was working for 12 hours every day and I was traveling for 4 hours. When I would arrive at home late in the night, my mind was a non-stop chatter for hours, and by the end of it, I was just exhausted. The highlight of my stellar performance ratings, that steep learning curve, was living under the shadow of a stronger, fatter curve of unfulfilled desires. And then came the thoughts. If the job doesn't let me come back home wanting to do what I want to do, is it worth it? I need the money. I don't want to rely on anyone else to support me. Travel is expensive. How will I afford it without a job? Quit my job to write and travel? I don't even know if I'm any good. If I was disciplined, I could do both. Who am I kidding? I can't do both. I'm working 12 hours and traveling for 4 hours every day. I may be a terrible writer. I don't even remember my basic grammar rules. Quit my job to write? Rubbish thoughts. And then that one radical thought. Why not? After punching in a few numbers and formulae on an Excel spreadsheet, I thought to myself, I have enough savings to take a career break for a year and do whatever I want to do. Why not? It will be difficult to find a job again without having one in hand already, said my father. Difficult, not impossible, said I. There's a big difference between the two. And then, in the sanctity of my four-walled room, at the idea of quitting, a cynical voice said, "Why would you even think of giving up something so good to go do something that you don't even know if you're good at?" That cynical voice was reasonable. I owed a lot to this company that I worked with and the job that I did every day. Through ups and downs, frustrating office politics, stressful employee relations issues, I had a network of mentors, friends, and colleagues who formed my support system. And in this network of colleagues, mentors, and friends, I had transformed from a shy nerd to a confident, independent person who went to work each day feeling like she could conquer any challenge life threw her way. That life I knew how to live, what to do even in the face of defeat. That monthly salary deposit SMS alerts from the bank was very special because that meant I could live on my own. I didn't need to depend on anyone else. I wasn't just somebody's daughter. I was Vinisha, and I was accepted as just that. Vinisha did a brilliant job. She did the responsible thing, the thing we're all supposed to do. But life beyond my job was incomplete and unsuccessful. I know for sure I wasn't the only one with this dilemma. Around me, in the bright corners of the cafeteria, there were co workers who spoke of unfulfilled dreams like owning that patisserie or that beachside restaurant in Goa. And these dreams would be swiftly dismissed under the covers of family obligations, financial troubles, responsibilities, doing the right thing, sometimes alcohol. Most of them were happy and they were grateful for the lives that they led, but for some of them, that tinge of regret never left their voices. I soon realized that the ones with regret were living their lives or measuring their victories against dreams that were not their own but borrowed from people that they thought were successful and happy. It was easier for them to follow a tried and tested path, pakka guarantees. They'd feel a temporary satisfaction in crossing milestones of a checklist. Earn a six-figure income by the time you're 25, check. Get married at 28, check. Have kids at 32, check. Become a vice president by the time you're 35, check. Being in an environment like that compelled me to adopt the same thought process. But there was always a voice within that quietly said, seriously, you don't even believe all that. It took me 2 years to acknowledge that voice and to realize that the lists in my journal written just the night before or every night before I fell asleep were very different from what I was telling myself during the day. But quitting this job, it meant letting go of the sole good thing I had going for me in my life. It meant being an outcast in a way and crossing those finely defined social boundaries to see what lies beyond. It meant being honest to that inner voice and being stronger than I had ever been. It also meant letting go of that network of friends and coming to terms with the reality that maybe not all of them are friends beyond the workspace. It also meant putting some serious efforts into writing, learning its techniques and verse, dealing with repeated rejections. The decision to quit or not to quit is never an easy one. When we stumble upon a job that favors us, that's a very happy accident. But when we know inside that we'd rather do something else, that gnaws at you until you examine it and say, all right, okay, I see you, now leave my gut alone. There were times I almost thought I would die with this decision. And I didn't know what it was that was going to kill me, quitting or not quitting. In September of 2014, I finally decided to quit this job that I was doing so well at and that defined me. Nearly everyone at work was surprised, except for me, because just the night before, I had drawn up a brave new list. And this brave new list was what I had in mind when I took my boss to that same bright corner of the cafeteria and officially resigned. So, what was this brave, new, inspirational list, you may ask? Well, I wanted to travel for 3 months. I wanted a pen pal outside of India. I wanted to write a book of poetry. whether it gets published or not. And I wanted to write a novel because I always thought I couldn't write a novel. And of course, I want to get all of this published. I wanted to read books in one sitting the way I used to during college vacations. But most importantly, I wanted to rediscover myself. Somewhere in the busyness of the corporate career, I had completely lost myself. So, armed with this brave new list, 2 days after my final day with the firm, I was on a flight to England, traveling with my own money for as long as I wanted, or realistically speaking, for as long as the visa and the budget lasted. On the third night, I was in the town of Sheepwash, an hour away from Exeter. Sheepwash is famous for its crime rates. One crime in 200 years. And that crime involved cattle. I was at a week-long writer's retreat in an old 18th century barn where I had to read my poem to a group of 60 people, most of whom had studied literature or they had published poetry. Two of them were tutors, professors, and famous poets in England. When I finished reading that love poem that I just drafted 5 minutes ago, there was a unanimous tone of approval from the audience. Tim Lydet, a professor of poetry at the Bath Spa University, said, "Yeah, I like the sound of what you wrote. And you don't need me to tell you how good that was. You obviously heard the audience." Now, Tim doesn't sound anything like me. He has a very expressive voice that demands that you hold your breath and your attention for him a full 3 minutes after he's done talking. I was completely in that trance and I barely heard what Jennifer had to say. Jennifer was the second tutor. She's an American professor of poetry. I still can't remember what she said back then, but I know for a fact it wasn't bad. 2 days later, in a private session, Tim and Jennifer praised some of my poems. And they said that my strength was in writing of the physical realm rather than the abstract, and that if I had to be a great writer, then I need to do incredible amounts of reading. I cherished this advice. It was the first time I had received professional writing advice face to face. When I walked back to my room that night, my heart was racing and there was a smile etched on my face, and I tried to sleep that night with one last thought. I may have been the only one in that barn who wasn't published yet, but I wasn't hopeless. I could write. My dreams were now slowly entering the scope of possibilities. With efforts in the right direction these past few months, they've become my way of life. So, what big things have I accomplished since I formally surrendered my corporate identity card? Well, since I quit, I've traveled for nearly 3 weeks every month. It can be tiring to explain the motivations of solo travel to friends, family, or anyone else who isn't familiar with the concept, but it's a ritual that I love. Traveling to discover the corners and history of a city with or without a map. Since I quit, I have discovered that the introvert within me, who couldn't make conversation with anyone in her teenage years, was long gone. She didn't exist. And I was free to share stories with strangers at restaurants. And every stranger had a beautiful story. Since I quit, I have sat down on random stairs in a city and watched as the city drives and runs past me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of watching others move ahead. It released a tightly held, unrealistic ambition in my gut that I had to succeed at everything I considered important. I was free from it. I can now define my strengths and areas of opportunities beyond the yearly need of an official appraisal or a job interview. I don't need someone telling me if I'm doing life right. I can decide for myself. And yes, I do have a pen pal in Australia. Some of my friends, and I now know who they are, they often tell me, "You look happier than we've ever seen you." My parents probably wonder if I'm wasting my life away. Some say, "I envy you." And when they say this, there is this fairy tale glimmer in their eyes, as if there is no challenge, no defeat on this kacha path of living my dreams. That is not true. I worry about what I'm going to do once the money is over, because there is no way I can go back to the job I was good at without feeling desperate. Brand new writers don't make enough money writing. How do I explain a career break that wasn't warranted by a formal education or family obligations to my future employers? Maybe they won't ask. How do I explain that not quitting would have killed me? Slowly. Maybe I won't need to. How do I explain that to win in life, we sometimes have to quit the wrong track that we've been running for years? I hope it won't be required and that they will see it on my face, just as my friends did. After all, quitting took as much courage as not quitting. It was scary. Actually, come to think about it, in this case, not quitting would have been the easier thing to do. Thank you.